Daniel, the devoted groom, Emily, the picture-perfect bride, and Mark, the charming best man. Three names that once symbolized love and loyalty, until one secret affair turned their wedding day into a crime scene soaked in blood and betrayal. Daniel and Emily were the kind of couple that made people believe in love. Their story began in Oak Hollow, a small, peaceful town where everyone knew each other. They met in high school, sitting next to each other in English class. Daniel was quiet, thoughtful, and kind. Emily was creative, gentle, and had a way of making everyone feel at ease. Over the years, their bond deepened. By the time they graduated college, they were inseparable. They bought a small home near the edge of town, where Emily ran an art studio and Daniel taught middle school science. People often said they were perfectly matched. He grounded her, and she inspired him. When Daniel proposed on a snowy evening in December, the town rejoiced. The engagement was announced with a photo of Emily's hand, gloved and sparkling with a diamond, resting in Daniel's palm. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that this wedding would be the event of the year. Invitations were sent out months in advance. The venue, Maple Grove Estate, was one of the most sought after in the region, known for its charming stone pathways and blooming gardens. Emily spent hours sketching out floral arrangements and table settings, while Daniel handled logistics and vendor meetings. It was a team effort, just like everything else in their lives. Mark, Daniel's best friend since college, was named best man without hesitation. He had always been a constant figure in their lives, joining them on weekend trips, helping with house projects, and even hosting their engagement party. Mark was charismatic, successful, and sharply dressed, with a quick wit and a smile that people remembered. To those on the outside, the bond between the three of them seemed solid, built on years of friendship and trust. As the wedding approached, the excitement in Oak Hollow grew. The local bakery posted photos of the custom cake they were preparing. Emily's dress fittings became a favorite topic at the salon. Friends and family began arriving in town early, eager to witness the long-anticipated ceremony. It felt like a celebration not just for the couple, but for everyone who had watched their love story unfold. Yet beneath the joyful surface, small cracks had begun to form. Emily had grown quieter in the weeks leading up to the big day. She was often distracted, checking her phone when no one was watching, slipping away during gatherings with vague excuses. Daniel, busy with last-minute arrangements, didn't notice the shift. Or maybe he did, but dismissed it as stress. Meanwhile, Mark had started spending more time with Emily under the guise of helping with wedding details. He drove her to appointments, reviewed music playlists, and offered advice on everything from lighting to floral design. Their closeness didn't raise alarms at first. After all, they were friends. But for Emily, the line between friendship and something else had begun to blur. And for Mark, that line had already vanished. As June 8th crept closer, the wedding looked picture-perfect from the outside. But inside the hearts of three people, something dangerous was already taking root. Something that no invitation, no dress, and no celebration could cover up. It started with a glance. Too long, too loaded, and everything began to unravel from there. Emily had always admired Mark's confidence. Where Daniel was gentle and dependable, Mark was bold and assertive. During the wedding planning, Mark made himself available for everything, from picking color palettes to coordinating with the caterer. At first, Emily appreciated the help. Planning a wedding was stressful, and Daniel was tied up with school exams and work obligations. Mark filled the gaps effortlessly. He texted her reminders, called to check in, and offered compliments that lingered in her mind longer than they should have. Emily began to crave those small moments with him. Their meetings became more frequent, sometimes under the pretense of last-minute planning, other times with no real reason at all. They'd talk late into the evening, often in his car outside her house or over drinks at the bar on quiet weeknights. Their connection felt dangerously intimate. She told herself it was just emotional support, a side effect of stress and nerves. But when Mark brushed a strand of hair from her face one night and she didn't pull away, they both knew they had crossed a line. The physical affair began just a month before the wedding. It was brief, messy, and full of guilt. Emily felt torn between her loyalty to Daniel and the thrill of something new, something forbidden. Mark, on the other hand, was falling deeper. What began as temptation quickly turned into obsession. He started imagining a future where Emily chose him instead. He saw himself not just as her escape, but as her true partner. Each stolen moment fed his delusion, even as Emily began pulling away. She told herself it was a mistake. The wedding was so close, and the guilt pressed down like a weight on her chest. She convinced herself that once they said their vows, everything would fall into place. The affair would be a secret she'd buried deep, a bad decision to be forgotten. But Mark wasn't ready to let go. He began acting possessive, showing up uninvited, questioning her loyalty, sending cryptic messages that left her rattled. Emily grew increasingly anxious. She stopped responding to his calls and tried to refocus on Daniel, but it was too late. Mark felt betrayed, like she had used him. The idea of her walking down the aisle toward another man made his stomach turn with rage. He started acting erratically. During wedding rehearsals, he would suddenly go silent or disappear altogether. Friends noticed his mood swings, but chalked it up to nerves. No one suspected the truth. Emily, meanwhile, began to dread the ceremony. She rehearsed her smile, her vows, her walk down the aisle, anything to keep her mind off the growing sense of doom. Mark was unraveling, and Emily was too scared to admit how bad things had become. She didn't want to destroy Daniel. She didn't want to destroy herself. But in trying to protect them all, she had unknowingly lit the fuse for something far more explosive than she could control. The morning of the wedding arrived with golden sunlight and a soft breeze. Perfect weather for what should have been a joyful celebration. At Maple Grove Estate, vendors bustled about, arranging flowers, setting tables, and preparing the grand outdoor space where Daniel and Emily would soon exchange vows. Guests began to arrive, dressed in pastels and smiles, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Daniel stood in his dressing room, adjusting his tie and laughing with his groomsmen. He was calm, excited, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. Emily, in another part of the estate, was being helped into her dress by her bridesmaids. Her expression was distant. The beautiful lace gown hung perfectly on her frame, but she looked pale and uneasy. She hadn't slept much. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her bouquet, her thoughts spiraling back to the text Mark had sent just after sunrise. It read only 5 words. "You don't belong to him." She hadn't replied. She couldn't. Emily wanted to pretend that if she ignored him long enough, the problem would disappear. But Mark had no intention of being ignored. Not today. As guests took their seats facing the floral arch, Mark was nowhere to be found. Daniel asked a groomsman to find him, assuming he had stepped out for air. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, Mark returned, his suit slightly wrinkled, his hair damp as if he had splashed cold water on his face. He offered a weak smile and took his place beside Daniel, saying nothing. No one questioned it. Meanwhile, inside the estate, something was already going wrong. A member of the catering staff discovered an overturned vase and blood smeared on the wall of the hallway leading to the groom's suite. Moments later, the wedding planner was found unconscious at the foot of the stairs, her head bleeding, her clipboard shattered beside her. The discovery sent a wave of confusion through the staff, but they kept quiet at first, trying to assess the situation without causing a panic. Back outside, the ceremony had finally begun. Emily appeared at the end of the aisle, escorted by her father. She looked ethereal, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. As she walked toward Daniel, Mark stood stiffly at his side, staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Then, just as the officiant began to speak, chaos erupted. A groomsman who had gone inside to check on the wedding planner rushed back out and shouted for help. His voice broke the silence like shattered glass. Guests turned in confusion, then horror, as word spread. There had been a violent incident inside. People rose from their chairs. Murmurs turned into gasps. Daniel stepped away from the altar, trying to understand what was happening. Emily froze in place, her bouquet slipping from her fingers. Mark didn't move. He just stood there, breathing hard, his eyes locked on the chaos like he had seen it coming all along. Something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. Police arrived at Maple Grove Estate within minutes of the 911 call. Guests were hurried away from the garden and into the safety of the banquet hall, their once celebratory chatter replaced with confusion and fear. Officers began securing the premises, searching for clues and questioning staff. An ambulance took the injured wedding planner to the hospital. She was unconscious, but breathing. No one yet understood what had truly happened or who was responsible. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on Mark. His sudden disappearance before the ceremony and strange behavior upon returning hadn't gone unnoticed. A bridesmaid mentioned seeing him re-enter the estate from the back entrance, looking agitated and sweating. One of the caterers said she heard raised voices coming from the hallway just before the crash. And then there was Emily, shaken, pale, and holding a phone with messages she refused to show anyone. While officers were combing through the building, one noticed something odd just beyond the manicured garden wall. A faint trail of smeared blood led across the grass toward a maintenance shed near the property's edge. It was a place few people even noticed, a forgotten storage building for old tools and decorations. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, crouched in the corner among garden supplies and tangled string lights, was Mark. His hands were bloodied. His suit jacket was torn. Next to him lay a hammer streaked in red. He didn't run when the police entered. He didn't say a word. He simply dropped the weapon and sat back against the wall, his breathing heavy and uneven. He was taken into custody without resistance. Emily was immediately escorted away by officers after the discovery. By then, the mood among the guests had shifted from shock to dread. Rumors swirled of betrayal, of violence, of secrets none of them had suspected. The once idyllic venue, now crawling with investigators, was no longer a place of celebration. It had become a crime scene. As detectives pieced things together, a clearer picture began to form. Mark and Emily's affair, which they had worked so hard to keep hidden, had left a digital trail. On Emily's phone were texts and voicemails from Mark, some affectionate, others increasingly erratic and threatening. In the days leading up to the wedding, his tone had shifted from passion to desperation to rage. In his apartment, police found a notebook filled with unsettling entries. Mark had written about his feelings for Emily in obsessive detail. He described dreams of running away with her, of confronting Daniel, of ruining the wedding so she'd have no choice but to be with him. The final pages were filled with scribbled plans and half-formed ideas, including one chilling phrase repeated several times: "Stop the wedding by any means." Later that evening, the injured wedding planner regained consciousness and confirmed what many feared. She had caught Mark vandalizing Daniel's belongings in the groom's suite and confronted him. That's when he attacked her with the nearest object he could find. The truth was undeniable. Mark hadn't just wanted to stop the wedding. He had been prepared to destroy anything or anyone in his way. The wedding never resumed. What was meant to be the happiest day of Daniel and Emily's lives became a moment frozen in tragedy. News of the incident spread quickly through Oak Hollow and beyond, making headlines in regional papers and trending online. The photo of the flower-lined aisle and the words "Wedding Day Attack" appeared side by side, a jarring reminder of how quickly joy can dissolve into horror. Daniel was devastated. In the hours after the police took Mark into custody, he learned about the affair through messages and evidence uncovered by investigators. The betrayal was as crushing as the violence. His best friend and his fiancée, two people he had trusted most, had conspired behind his back, and the truth had unraveled in front of his family, friends, and community. He gave no statement to the media, made no public appearance. He left the estate in silence, accompanied by his sister and a few close friends, his face expressionless and hollow. Emily was taken into protective custody initially, both as a potential witness and for her own safety. The authorities needed her version of events. She admitted to the affair, though she claimed she had ended it weeks earlier. She said she never believed Mark was dangerous, only emotional and overwhelmed. But investigators found inconsistencies in her timeline and messages that suggested she had maintained contact with him far longer than she admitted. Still, she was not charged. Legally, her actions were immoral, but not criminal. Mark was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, and criminal trespass. In court, he showed little emotion. During his initial arraignment, he stood still, hands cuffed, eyes staring ahead. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Security footage showed him entering the restricted hallway near the groom's suite. His fingerprints were on the weapon, and the planner's testimony sealed his fate. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole for the violent attack and the premeditated intent to sabotage the wedding through physical harm. Emily left town shortly after the court proceedings. Her art studio shut down. Friends stopped returning her calls. She was no longer seen as the bride-to-be, but as the woman at the center of a scandal that tore apart a once perfect relationship and nearly cost someone their life. She disappeared quietly, her future uncertain, her name forever tied to a day that turned bloody. Daniel, after months of silence, slowly began rebuilding his life. He resigned from his teaching job and moved to a nearby city to start fresh. Those close to him said he rarely spoke of what happened. He avoided public events and declined interviews. In time, he found a quieter way of living, far from the spotlight and the painful memories of June 8th. Maple Grove Estate, once a favorite wedding venue, struggled in the aftermath. Couples canceled their bookings. The staff changed. Eventually, the estate was sold to new owners and rebranded, but locals still whispered its former name, the House of Ruined Vows. The day had started with promises of forever. It ended with handcuffs, sirens, and a broken heart.